Hello, friends. You are now listening to I Know Nothing. I'm Marcus.
I'm George.
And today on the podcast, we'll be discussing climate change skepticism. The I Know Nothing podcast is a progressive story. Up until recently, George and I have done nothing positive for the environment. We do not feel associated with the climate advocates of our day, partially because they feel so far removed. However, that must not stop us. So we want to become more educated on the issues surrounding the climate and hopefully show the struggle and success of our journey to help others. This podcast will be a little different. There won't be a company in focus or a challenge update today, as to be honest, we have had little time to turn this one around, so we just hope it's going to be fun. Am I right, George?
Fingers crossed, eh?
Fingers crossed. So let's start with how your week has been, or better yet, how the 2 days have been since we last did the podcast.
Well, not bad. Work's, again, I hate saying this because it's such a non-thing to say, but work's been busy. That everyone's work's busy, really, isn't it? You know, who doesn't think they're busy at work? I mean, I suppose some people, but...
I'll tell you who doesn't. Those people that try and sell you courses on how to live your life on a beach, but also make money on the internet as well. Those guys seem to have the life.
Yeah, although I'm pretty sure they're just sat in an office pretending.
Yeah.
Call me skeptical.
Mate, call me skeptical. And this podcast is all about skepticism today. Oh, mate, what a business. What a business.
How about you? How have you fared in the last couple of days?
Mate, not gonna lie, I'm a little bit better now. But if we recorded straight after work, I would have been a little bit upset.
Really? How come?
Yeah, so I started that, that coffee type thing again at work.
Yeah.
And no one turned up. So
Zero.
Just me and the guy who helps organize it with myself. And I took it personally.
I'm so sorry.
Which I don't think I should have done.
No.
And it is a bit of an ask, and to be honest, it shouldn't really affect me in the sense that it did. Because I did say, even if it just one other person would come, it's still a success. However, 0 people came, so that was rough.
It's a failure.
And it was like, I actually went around the office asking people, "Hey, you coming?" "Oh no, I've got my cat to pick up." It was...
In fairness, I do. There is some part of me that understands, like, people just want to go home. You know what I mean?
For sure.
You're at work all day. The last thing you want to do is go and chat with your co-workers after work.
For sure.
Sometimes.
I totally get it.
But then again, you also go for drinks after work, so it's kind of it's a mix.
Mate, I totally get it. Like, it is unpaid. It is after work, but it is only 30 minutes. It's not like a whole hour. It's not like anything crazy. So
yeah.
However, it still was kind of upsetting, and I don't know what to do. And I think we just go back to the drawing board and understand why no one turned up. Again, it's coming back from like a layoff, which was quite a while, like a few weeks. So it's kind of understandable that it would be a dip, but 0 is still crazy, right? I think one of the things though that frustrated me the most, and I know that potentially a few colleagues listen to this, so it's nothing personal, but one of the things that frustrates me the most is that at work you often hear lots of complaints about, like, let's say the team or people don't communicate with each other and stuff, and this and that, they're doing something wrong or whatever. And it's like, I I want to be able to, when I hear complain, I want to be able to provide a solution.
Right.
I guess that's just in my nature to do that. And so I feel like when people are complaining and they also have like the ability to, not have the full solution, but to partake in a solution, for no one to turn up, it's there like, oh, so why are you complaining still? Well, why, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, I get you. So you're saying that if people have an issue with work, an actual issue, and you're sort of posing a way of them putting that on the record in a way,
yeah,
and trying to make a change, then how can they complain? I suppose maybe the answer to that is that people complain about everything.
I think that's what
me included.
That's when I that's when I was cycling back. I was like, what the fuck, and then I came to the realization that people just complain for the sake of complaining sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
And they might actually provide the solution themselves.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is maybe that people don't want to try and change work outside of work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if there was an hour in the day at work, like once every month or something, or half an hour even, where people could discuss it, then it's kind of different, because then it's the management saying, look, we're going to give you half an hour here
for sure.
to actually try and sort out the problems you've got. And, you're being paid, so you've all got to do it, and we're doing it because we actually care about what your thoughts are. Because if that doesn't happen, then it's kind of like, why would I stay after work to solve work? Why would I in my free time?
Yeah. Yeah, but you see, this is the thing though. If it became popular and lots of people were turning up and there was value provided from this thing, then management would be able to be like, well, yeah, I would happily pay for this 30-minute session for everyone to have that discussion, because people go to it, people get value from it, etc. So, it's the...
Could you suggest that you feel like... So are you saying that you feel like, as employees, your sort of worries and complaints aren't heard enough?
No, not at all. It's just like with any type of team, you don't know the specifics of someone else's role. So, there's always going to be communication barriers, etc. And it's not like the management have anything to do with that. It just means that more people need to communicate better. I personally feel. And so let's provide a platform for that to happen. Let's provide a forum, etc. And
but specifically, what do you mean?
So for example, with boats, yeah, you'll have the people who are designing the boats, and then people who are constructing the boats. For example, this isn't specific to just the company I work for, and so okay. If these two are not talking and saying, like, the necessary conversations are taking place, so the engineer will be like, you can't design it like this because that's not feasible. Yeah, but it would be, I think, more helpful for my colleagues or colleagues in general to kind of understand why the designer wanted to design it that type of way, and have that conversation of, oh, what are you trying to achieve? What's going through your head, etc. Or why is it not feasible? And when you have that type of conversation, you start producing, I personally believe, things that assist and help with the project itself. If the designer could understand what the engineer is talking about when he says it's not feasible, he would be able to design the thing that he wanted to, but with special changes to help the engineer, for example, because they're already considering each other.
I suppose my response to that would be, and this is me just being completely honest, and it's that I think that's too much like work for me.
Yeah, no, but it's supposed to be work. Yeah.
but unpaid work.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so I'm not
But I
forced.
think that's so that's the difference between you and other people, Marcus.
Yeah.
That's because you care enough about what you do
No.
that you're like, look, I'll stay late because I want to be better. I want everyone else to be better, and I want the company to be better. But most people aren't like that. Most people are, and this isn't knocking your colleagues, but most people are lazy. Most people don't give a shit, and most people are frankly unmotivated. Like in life, most people are not that. Like that people struggle with the smallest things in life. I find. I mean, we all do, but some people struggle more, and people that struggle with the smallest things also, I think, struggle with the bigger things, but they just don't notice it.
Yeah, and I think it's that noticing is key, right? Because if you didn't say that, I'd be like, well, I'm trying to help in terms of, if you are struggling with the smaller things, it's very difficult to ask in work time. So ask in the free period where you're not going to be judged or anything. Yeah.
I suppose that I think that's that sort of conversation. I think if it's not happening, if people are struggling to find time to communicate and just say like, this isn't happening, or as a team we're not doing this, or I'm finding this bit of communication, or I'm struggling to get this message across. If that's not happening, then I feel like that's a failure on management's part to allow that conversation to be happening.
Yeah.
And it's admirable that you're trying to make that happen. It is, but I can see why people don't want to engage with it, because they're just like, why would I do this? My wage isn't going to go up because of this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make any more money. The company might, but I'm not.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I don't personally think that. I think there are a lot of people at my work who do care. I think it was just circumstance that 0 people came.
Sure, of course.
So you got to attribute a lot of that to circumstance, because it is also the Monaco yacht show, and so things happened there.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't help. But it's interesting in terms of a separate conversation with that kind of thing, in how people think. Separating what I've just gone through, it's interesting to talk about how people would say, yeah, well, it doesn't provide me more of a salary or pay, so what's the point in doing it? But then the way that I think is that my value to the company is dictated by my actions in the company. And so let's say if I'm doing above and beyond, then, well, my value will just increase. And of course, maybe it's not this year or next year or 5 years' time, but at some point, something's got to give, and something's got to be realized where it's like, well, Marcus is doing X amount, we should be able to give him the value he deserves, I guess. But more importantly as well, if I'm able to help others better because I understand them more, I'd be like, well, my job is now much easier and your job is too. So fine, I'm not getting paid more for the 30 minutes, but now my whole job in the year is now a very easy, it's an easier task.
Yeah, I think that's, I suppose, and I'm sure people will come to it, like you say, when the timing is right, and it's not just funny circumstance that causes it to happen. However, I think that, I suppose, it's aimed at, I think, probably, to be honest, a small group of people, and probably smaller than you think as well, because some people will work very hard during the day and then leave. And I think at the end of the day, you're looking at it from a valuable perspective of a long-term and intelligent view to take on things, and I think you're completely right that if you add more value to a company, you're worth more to that company, irrelevant of what job you're doing. But people don't think like that. People just want to, do their work, go home. And to be honest, it's very easy for me to spend another half an hour of my day, because I'm 23, turning 24 next month. I don't have children.
I live by myself at the moment. My girlfriend's going to come out soon, and I really don't have any responsibilities. And so, a lot of the people have children, families, etc., that they want to go home to. So it is a big ask. All I'm saying is that, my day was good, but it was upsetting at the end. 0 people. You're waiting there like, maybe they're late. No. Oh, mate, heartbreaking. Hey, we go again.
It's painful to imagine.
I think it's really easy to also throw in the towel, and I feel that if you really believe that you're doing good in general, regardless if it's environmental, your workplace, to your friends, etc., that just because it's not recognized yet doesn't mean that you should stop.
No.
Wow, that was a great transition to life in general.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking I had at work this week. So it's not even my work she took credit for, but someone tried to take credit for other people's work, and it just didn't like it.
Yeah, I'm
not a fan of people that do that.
That's a funny one.
Because essentially, it's such a small thing as well. It's so trivial, which is partly why it's like I don't really care, but it almost makes it more perplexing that she did it. Basically, all it was we got a whiteboard at work, and I write with one other guy and a new guy now, the sort of the reports, and we came up with a coding system basically to keep track of things on the board.
Oh yeah,
a little bit. But the accounting people have their own bit next to ours, so for the same company they'll have another column. But she then sort of just claimed credit for the whole thing and slated. She basically was like, "Oh yeah, they just did it really badly, so I just redid it all." And it was actually like none of the coding that we came up with, you came up with. Like we did all of that, and it's so small, it literally doesn't matter. But now I just don't understand why you tried to take credit for it. I think it's partly because she knows she's not doing enough work. She's new, and she's very expensive. She's the first chartered accountant in the company, and she's just not quite doing as much work as I suppose one might.
She doesn't listen to this podcast, does she?
I hope not. No, it's not. It's not really. No, I don't think she does. Well, but it's not really thing is, it's not a reflection on her.
Right,
it's just that.
I was just about to say.
As far as I know, as far as I can tell so far, it's just that she doesn't quite have enough work. Like the systems aren't in place yet to allow her to do enough work. Yeah. But it's also kind of like there's eyes on her, I suppose.
It's a really interesting one, people taking credit for other people's work, especially in the workplace where you're being judged and progression means that you need to be recognized for the work that you've done. Because do you go to your boss and, effectively not snitch, but snitch on that person? Because that also kind of makes you look bad in a way.
I so nearly told the boss. Not. It was like literally. It was actually because he was asking for my opinion on her. So it wasn't
really?
Like, oh, I'm going to tell on you. It was literally just I was like, actually, if I'm honest, I consider being like, if I'm honest, I actually had a rant about her to my girlfriend the other day.
Yeah.
And it was such a small thing, but she did piss me off. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to give her a fair chance. I'm not going to say anything. Because it's just not worth it.
Wow, this will be, I think, I don't know whether to tell the story, but I will, because I'm not saying names, and no one knows where I work, and to be honest, it's actually meaningless now. I've moved on with my life, so who cares?
Cool.
But it was like the first few months. First few weeks even of my work, and I'm trying to do as much as possible. I want to make a great impression, and I'm doing a lot of things that aren't really in my scope of my job.
Yeah.
And effectively someone else put their name on a drawing that I started.
Really?
Yeah, and she was in a and so it happened, and I remember opening the drawing again to do a little update, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, I just spent a few days on this, and my name's not even there anymore, and it was again like, oh, okay, but then I didn't go to my boss or anything, and I didn't actually make a big deal out of it, because in the end I'm glad that I didn't, because what I came to realize was that I was brand new, and of course we work with clients, right? And so she wanted the work that I did and our team did to be accepted by the client, because and that would have been an easier conversation because her name was on it, and because my scope of my role didn't include that particular drawing.
Yeah.
So she was actually kind of almost looking out for the amount of work we've done as a team, and I didn't see that. I just thought that she was taking credit for it, and I was like, oh, this is upsetting and stuff. And so
I suppose that's where, sorry for interrupting, I suppose the important thing there though is that really she should have told you.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's just a name on a drawing, I guess. And when you've been there for 5 years, it's like,
but you spent days working on something,
Yeah.
and then you don't write your name on something on someone else's work, like unless it sounds like she had a good reason to, and you've managed to justify it for her. But I just can't imagine ever thinking that'd be okay without going, look, Marcus, I'm going to put my name on your work.
Yeah.
I'll never claim credit for it within the company. And unless she has to because of whatever. But this needs to be my name, because otherwise if the client finds out what your role is and who you really are, they might get pissed off because you're new and it's not a reflection on who you are, because it's good work.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that's totally legitimate in what you're saying, but it didn't, and so that's okay. I feel like the important lesson for that, though, the really important lesson is that sometimes when something bad happens, you do just need a bit of time just to cool off and think about it rationally and objectively. Like,
or ask about it nicely. Like, hey, I just noticed that. It's kind of difficult sometimes to ask things nicely.
Yeah.
Because people will take it the wrong way. But I know exactly what I mean. Like, you should never jump to a conclusion or
for sure
assume the worst, because usually people aren't doing the thing you immediately assume is a bad thing.
Yeah, you project what you think is the truth onto that situation.
Although I do think that, I suppose, because I like try so hard not to forget to credit people for things they do.
Yeah.
I think I'm sure there's many other things in life that I forget to do. If you know what I mean? Like, there were things that other people focus on that they hold with high regard. But for me, like, doing something with someone and then to a group sort of suggesting that only you did it is like just a terrible thing to do.
Yeah, I really dislike it.
Even when I've done
most of
the work on something, I like the other day, and this is no reflection on anyone, but like to get internet in our house, it's been such a hassle. It's taken like over a month. I've had to I spent hours on the phone, and I've saved the house hundreds of pounds through like demanding credit for various things, like money for time spent, etc. And then the other day, one of the guys was working from home, and it was installed on that day. And even then, I was like, thanks for sorting it, Ben. Like, on the chat, and then a couple of people were like, yeah, cheers for sorting it, Ben. And it's kind of like, it's fine, because nobody quite realizes like the amount of time I've spent, like literally hours and hours. I shouldn't have had to. It's just Virgin have been terrible, but like, I had to get permission from the landlord to get the drilling. Had to like organize where it was going to go. Organise getting it from the neighbour, because there's no cable for ours.
Oh wow!
Like,
wow,
and then they like didn't show up one day, so get them to come back. Then get them to come earlier because they say, "Oh, it's going to be a few weeks," and I'm like, "Well, no, put me through to someone that can change the date." So I spent ages doing it, but no one knows that, so I can't be annoyed that no one's like, "Hey, thanks for doing it." But people are really bad at saying thank you for things like, mate, almost every fucking bit of furniture in this house was brought to this house by me. I'm now just got a rant about.
Yeah, and now it's on the internet as well.
Yeah, yeah. So bad.
Whoever listens to this podcast, they'll know the truth, mate. They'll know the truth.
I think the thing is that people are grateful. You just have to know that they are.
You know, it's
sort of the point I was trying to get to.
It's super interesting, mate, because I see ourselves as quite similar. You know, we grew up together, basically, going to the same school, and we've always been friends, right? But last 2 years ago, I wasn't like that at all. You know, I did do everything, and I wanted credit for doing everything, to a degree.
Yeah.
You know, not crazy, but to a degree, and it did grind people the wrong way to the point where they didn't like me in the end of the year, along with other things that I did, and then. Obviously, because I regarded all of them as friends, and so I lost all my friends at university going into my third year, and that broke me, if I'm honest, because you know you don't want to lose all your friends, and they didn't want to hang out with me, etc. But then I totally attribute that to how I acted with them, wanting the gratitude. And when I didn't get it, I'd be like, well, what the fuck? I've done this, and this.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, they're not going to be grateful when you're in like a semi-heated argument about tidying up. And you're like, well, fucking every single time I'm tidying up, what's going on? And so it doesn't equate to what you want in the end anyway. And I came to that realization, obviously, when I lost... you know, my friends at uni, and so I have gone through that change to where you roughly are now, and now I really I now struggle accepting credit for things that I've done, especially in teams,
right,
because it reminds me of who I once was, I guess. I wasn't really a nice guy, to be fair, mate, and so it's interesting. And to be honest, I wouldn't trade that, because I think if I went into work with that mentality of always seeking that approval of what you've done, I don't think that would have gone well with anyone, really.
I think introspection is very important, and I never really know whether I am introspective or not, because you wonder, you know, do I just look like everyone else by the perception of everyone else? Does that make sense? Like, but I think about how I treat people and the things I do all the time.
Do?
Yeah. Like, I think about it all the time. Probably every interaction I have with someone, I'll think about like the effect it's had. Not every interaction, but every sort of... There must be every hour of the day there'll be something that I think about.
That's really interesting, because now I do too. And so and it's not like a fake thing. It's not like I'm trying to be fake. It's really wow. You know, I just don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to make anyone upset. I do want people to like me, and you know, I guess introspectively, I've always been someone who wants approval of others, and I used to try and get that by being the best and being better than everyone else, and then I realized, oh crap, that's actually not the way of getting true approval and real like friendships and relationships with people. It's actually by understanding how every interaction that you do matters.
I'd agree.
What a podcast, mate. We're talking about climate change skepticism, and we've just had a good talk, actually. You know, it's 30 minutes in.
It's been quite nice, actually.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
You know, what really is a podcast is people wanting to listen to other people having a conversation, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure many people listening will have experienced many of the same things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe we should go on to the topic of climate skepticism.
Yeah, so I think it would be worth explaining why we're doing this podcast. And we are really trying to go off the cuff a little bit with this one. But for me, the reason why we came to the conclusion of doing this is for us to have a conversation, we do need to understand where the other side is coming from. And we see it a lot, well, I see it a lot in the media and the news, etc.
You all right?
Yeah, sorry, mate. I thought someone was knocking. And I see a lot of people in the media, etc., where you have interactions of people, let's say protesting, and then the other side are wanting to do interviews to make them look stupid or whatever. And it's not really a discussion. No one's actually having a proper discussion, trying to understand where the other person is coming from. And I personally believe that, I don't want to say convert, because it's not like we're Mormons or anything. But if you want to convert someone, or at least have them understand your point of view, you need to have that discussion. But that means that you need to understand where they're coming from as well. And so we need to kind of at least hash out some climate skepticism and have that discussion a little bit.
Having said that, I do think I'm about to spend the next 30 minutes bashing their views.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as nice as what you just said was.
Okay.
I think I'm going to really struggle.
More importantly, we've got to be honest too. Yeah, so thanks, George. Yeah. All right, go on, George. Let's start us off.
So myth number one.
Myth number one. Oh wow.
Sorry. Yeah, God, this is barbed, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Point number one.
Okay.
It's cold. Global warming must be a myth. I'd like to start us off on this one, and I think we need to know a few things before we get into the detail. Now, it's, I suppose, to explain. Well, this is really to explain why this is just wrong. Okay.
Okay.
But
yes,
we can have a conversation about it.
Yes, Lord George.
I'd agree. So, anyway, I'm going to explain why I think it's wrong. Because I think it's a silly point, if I'm honest, and I think it ignores basic science. Or it's not quite basic, it's just above basic. So, essentially, we need to know what the jet stream and the polar vortex are, because they're pretty instrumental in what's happening with it being cold and why it's getting colder at times of year. Now, a jet stream is just a narrow variable band of very strong air current encircling the globe about a few miles above the Earth. Now, I think it's cool. It's either called the jet stream because is it that? Is it because jet planes can sit in it, or is that a red herring? Is it just because it's fast moving air? It's a jet of air.
Are you? Yeah, I mean, it could be just like in Finding Nemo, where the turtles are in some kind of jet stream.
Yeah. Well, anyway, where the name comes from maybe doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And there are a few of these jet streams floating around. People talk about the jet stream, but actually there's a few. I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't know that. And now the polar vortex. So we've got the jet stream and the polar vortex. And the polar vortex is a band of strong winds high up in the atmosphere above the Arctic regions. And they're what basically keep the Arctic so cold. You with me so far?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, now disturbances in the jet stream and intrusions of warmer air caused by potentially global warming can disturb this polar vortex. Okay?
Yeah.
So like the jet stream basically cuts in almost to the polar vortex and it drags Arctic air south into the sort of the middle latitudes. And this brings big, like, sort of unimaginable amounts of cold air plunge down, and a lot of what we were seeing sort of earlier on in the year in North America, where it just shouldn't have been such tremendous weather, but it was sort of late in the winter, or they've just come out the other side of winter and it's still horrendous. And apparently that is actually what's caused that extreme weather.
So, exactly. And you are probably wondering, how does that link to climate change? And that's where it gets kind of tricky. There are some evidence that the jet stream is slowing and becoming wavier as the planet warms. The jet stream interacts with the polar vortex, like George discussed, helping to bring a numbing temperature further south. So scientists also point to a complex sequence of events involving sea ice, which is rapidly diminishing in the Arctic, and as the ice retreats, summertime heat is absorbed by the dark ocean that lies underneath. This heat is released into the atmosphere during winter, spurring winds that can disrupt the polar vortex.
Yeah, so I suppose those 2 points. Number one, I guess, is because I think it is interesting, because when I was looking this one up, I assumed it would be. I've seen such confident responses to climate activists. Oh, sorry, no, climate skeptics, saying it's you moron, it's the polar vortex, blah blah blah. But when you actually look up how does this link to climate change, nobody actually knows.
So you can understand where the skepticism comes from then.
Yeah. I mean, there's some very strong evidence, right. I think. What you just said there, I reckon there's some fairly strong evidence to suggest that some of that's true, or a combination of that is what's happening. But it is interesting to see that actually that's the case. Although, having said that, I do think it's important, because I think a lot of people use the fact that science can't confirm something as evidence for it being wrong.
Right.
But that's not the case. It's actually the beauty of science that it's so honest about the reality of things, rather than going, this is the truth. Rather than acting like sort of any politician of our day, science just says, we actually aren't sure.
Yeah.
Here's what we think. Here's the evidence to why we think it, but we're not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, and yeah, that's really interesting, actually, if you think about science, because, everyone says science equals fact. And like you just said, there is, obviously, most science is fact, etc. But there is that point where it's like, well, everything is pointing towards that hypothesis. It's just sometimes the information is not there to confirm that hypothesis, right? Is that what you're basically saying? Right.
Well, kind of, but sometimes it's just that the evidence is very compelling. It's just that it hasn't been, because at the end of the day, even some of the things we hold true are just theories.
Yeah.
It's all just a theory. Everything's just a theory, but a theory is the word theory is misinterpreted. Because theory means that there's evidence and it's been peer-reviewed, potentially. Peer-reviewed theory essentially means that there's strong evidence from multiple people with different intentions and using different methods that have been able to get the same answer.
Now, here's a question which we haven't discussed, but if I wrote a theory, could I get you to peer review it because you're my friend?
The only issue would be is that neither of us have credibility.
Let's say we did have credibility.
But also, it'd be important for us if the issue would be getting it published, and also we'd need multiple peer reviews.
Would we? But I'd just get multiple friends.
So you'd need to have multiple friends that were highly regarded in the scientific community that could show that they did substantial studies to that tested in different ways. It's not just
Okay.
a theory. Isn't just you going.
It's not like
I believe
marking.
this.
It's not like marking.
George, do you believe this?
Right.
Yes, I believe this.
Right.
Yeah. Peer review basically means like they do the same study but maybe in a
Right,
different way.
right.
They try and replicate the results.
And actually, you know, regardless of them being your friend, their credibility is also on the line as well. So, you know, people are working their self-interest and they almost want to disprove someone else's theory, because if the theory's wrong and you've both said that it's correct, their credibility goes down with yours too.
I mean, throughout history, there's always been people and, you know, groups, and like even science has been, you know, and can be political and partisan. People were basically treated like witches for believing in gravity and around Earth, and
still don't believe it,
like
mate.
that.
Still don't believe it.
But yeah. So have you got
A myth?
the next point?
I mean, a point?
A point?
point?
Yeah, not a myth.
Yeah, so point number 2. Plants need carbon dioxide to survive. And if we get rid of all the carbon dioxide, it will kill them. Right? This one is a little misleading because it's partly true. Plants do need CO2 to live. They also grow quicker when CO2 concentrations are increased in the right conditions. However, this only matters when there aren't any other limiting factors. In most real-life scenarios, nitrogen concentration will limit a plant's growth, stopping the increase of plant productivity. Furthermore, CO2 is creating dry climates. A lack of water will always kill a plant if it doesn't get enough.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, that actually with this one, it's in a way true. In the sense that, well, I suppose it's just a misleading statement, because I've seen it used in, I think, like congressional. It's
a straw man, effectively, what you're saying.
Yeah,
it's like it's an argument that doesn't really have any place in climate change.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's just it's just abusing the fact that it's stupid people abusing.
Whoa, hold on.
No, because
you're gonna go with the stupid people. Okay, do your thing, George.
Yeah, because and here I'm gonna justify why, and that's because when it comes to things like politics, I think it's unfair to call people stupid. You know, to say that this point of view or this point of view is stupid is wrong. But trying to use the fact that plants need CO2 as an argument to increase coal consumption is moronic.
That doesn't make sense at all.
You are either evil or stupid.
Yeah.
Because either you know that what you're saying is wrong, or you believe that what you're saying is right, and you believe that plants need more CO2.
You know, I followed a lot of climate skeptics Facebook pages. And if I'm honest, my mind is very impressionable. And so I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Oh yeah, that totally makes sense too. But what I did find, and of course you pinch yourself and you realize actually they're very, I won't use the word. Wow, very political. Yeah. But what they seem to agree on is that CO2 does cause climate change and that the climate is changing. However, a lot of the skepticism is whether we are providing enough CO2 to cause the climate change. Effectively, they say, it's going to happen anyway, regardless of what we do.
Although I'm pretty sure there's also really strong evidence that it is us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame we didn't really look into this that much. I think it's just trying to start that conversation and get people thinking, really. Yeah, I mean,
I think at a minimum it is, and I know this for sure. At a minimum, it is agreed by the vast majority of the scientific community that humans are at least having an impact on climate change.
Yeah.
Even if it's not 100% our fault, it is definitely in part our fault. However, I think a lot of people believe it's massively our fault.
And you know, one of, because I've obviously told friends about this podcast, and you know, you do have friends and family who are skeptical at least, or just choose not to believe it. And this question did come up, and my answer to that was effectively, regardless of the environment, it's pretty obvious that we are just wasting so much. And when I say we, I know that I waste so much. I used to, not so much anymore, but I used to buy a lot of crap that I didn't need with money that I didn't have to pursue what I thought was happiness. And potentially I still attribute things with happiness. It's not like that's changed massively. But as a society, we are buying so much things. And regardless of the environment, one, that cannot be good for anything, really. And two, environmentally, where does that all come from? That must have an effect somewhere on something, which seems to be causing this climate to change at a much faster pace. You know?
Yeah.
That's basically my spiel. Because I do feel like we're just wasting and spending and buying shit and it's you have to ask, like, okay, what's the deal here? But yeah,
agreed.
Carry on.
No, I think that's a good place to leave that one. At the end of the day, I think if you're gonna deny that one, if you're going to deny that, if you're going to try and say that, you know, we need more CO2 than we have now, or it's, you know, it's fine to keep going up, then you should really, really look at some science. Start, you know, not pseudoscience, not internet articles. Like, look at some proper studies, and don't just search for studies that agree with your point of view. Look at a broad range of them.
Yeah.
Read a few,
yeah.
and make sure you check where the source is from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, however much you want it to be true, if it's a bad source, you just got to ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah. Facebook is not news. It's not a source.
No. So the next one that I've heard quite a bit, and I suppose it's partly because a certain someone is always shouting about it, but it's that China is the issue and that the West can do nothing to help. I mean, I think, frankly, this one's just perception.
Yeah.
Because China is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. However, a sixth of the population lives there.
Yeah. And they all look Chinese. You know, that's crazy, right?
What?
Yeah, that was sorry, I generalized a whole country. I don't feel particularly proud of myself. All I'm saying, and I'm going to try and dig myself out of this hole, and I apologize. I don't mean to be offensive at all.
I can't wait for this one.
But all I'm saying is a lot of the population in China, and I'll Google it just to be factual, are Asian or Chinese.
That's all you were saying?
Or Chinese. But you don't have that multiculturalism that you have in the West as much.
Right.
But again, that might be a perception. And that might have been racist.
Just going to admit it, that might have been racist.
I don't know what to do.
I mean...
Carry on with what you're saying,
What you initially
George.
said sounded a bit dodgy, but what you've now said is probably true. I'm not sure what the point you're trying to make is.
I was just saying that a sixth of the population
Yeah.
are Chinese. And from what I'm assuming, not a lot of the Chinese are white or black or... Right. And so it's very, like, it's crazy to think that if you went to, like, a small village in China, you might be the very first white person they would see.
Yeah.
Which I find crazy.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is weird.
It's kind of weird to think about.
This point that China is the problem is literally just
Thanks, George.
irrelevant of who they are. Is frankly it's just perception.
Yeah.
You know, they're actually one of the largest investors in renewable energy. And I think that increased investment has come from really sort of the response to a rapid growth in green business, and also at the end of the day they need to clean up the air polluting their cities because it is bad. But they're trying really hard.
You know, it's really interesting. It was a similar argument where it's like, yeah, the production quality is worse than America's production quality. And it's like, oh yeah, maybe because of obviously they've just had to start. But do you think that's going to be like that forever?
Yeah.
Of course not. Of course their production quality is going to increase 10-fold, 12-fold, 30-fold. And one day they will be better. And that probably is around about now. Because everything is now made in China. And I don't see a complaint about my iPhone. Well, actually I see a lot of complaints about iPhones. But wrong example. But it is a perception, absolutely. It is right to say that China ranks top in the national CO2 emissions, though. It emits twice that of the USA, who is second. However, like you said, they have a sixth of the population of the world. And so that means per person, they aren't really as bad. In 2017, USA, Canada, and Australia were all high per capita in terms of CO2 emissions. And the UK actually is quite impressive here. They almost halved their emissions per capita since 1990, which is really nice and puts the UK on a pedestal again. The USA is probably the worst in the world at the moment. Some would say they're the real villain here. They emitted 15.74 tons of CO2 per capita in 2017 versus China's 7.72 tons of CO2 per capita. So you can see that China emits less than half that of the USA, which is pretty crazy as a fact. However, if you want to think about it, we did cover this on a previous podcast. China and the USA actually emit almost half of the world's CO2 emissions combined, which is crazy again.
It's nuts.
I think, what we're trying to say is that it's a myth to think that it's someone else's fault, that it's someone else on the other side of the world's fault, like China or, Thailand, etc., or the Philippines, when it really isn't. Actually, a lot of the things that we can do to solve this is done on our front doorstep, and actually a lot of the problems are coming from your front doorstep. That's what I would say, George.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's just completely wrong to pretend that China's the issue.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, really, the USA are still massively benefiting financially from destroying the environment, and I don't mind saying that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and in recent years, it's got worse, frankly.
Yeah.
And so to try and point the finger at China, I think, is very hypocritical. And nicely, we can actually sort of sit here and point the finger a bit, because, I mean, not that we've done anything, so maybe we can't. But as a country, as a nation, the UK is actually quite a leader in terms of green energy, as we're finding.
But shout out to the American who keeps listening to our podcast. We don't want to bash your country at all. And
please don't stop listening.
Don't stop listening, please, please, please. We're all, I guess, in this together, which I guess is another skeptic's point of view, like globalism, etc. But regardless, I think one of the other things that I saw, George, and we didn't actually have time to find any facts on this, but what I saw a lot of was people saying that the measurement of temperature back in the day and today is false, and you can't attribute that to climate change due to the area surrounding the instruments to measure the temperature is being built on. So, cities are growing, and so the areas where people would be measuring the temperature of the world is increasing due to the fact that there's no more greenery and things of that nature. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting fact, I guess, or point of view. And they also said something along the lines of the temperature reading hasn't been, the temperature reading has changed over time. It's not exactly the same method as it was previously, and so therefore the temperature readings can't be at the same, etc. And like I said, my initial point of view was like, oh wow, that kind of makes sense, and I understand why then you're skeptical, because it's not giving a exact comparison. But then I then thought, well, yeah, of course it's then, just because it's being built around the area is being built on, doesn't mean that the Earth is not, temperature isn't rising. Because if you look around you, the whole world is being built on. Yeah? The likes of tarmac is being applied everywhere, pretty much. There aren't very many parks. The forests aren't, all of that. So just because maybe the temperature is being changed by the area around the temperature instrument, and I don't know if it's just what is that word? What would you use to measure the temperature?
A thermometer?
No, I feel like it would be a bit more advanced than just a thermometer. I'd be surprised.
I mean, a digital thermometer.
Maybe. Okay.
There might be a cool word for a more accurate. I mean, my view on this one is that it's a pretty rubbish fact. Well, it's a pretty rubbish argument, I think, to try and say that it's false. Because for one, it might be true that some of the instruments have been in built up places, but at the end of the day, we can measure the temperature anywhere in the world now. You can go and look up the temperature for pretty much anywhere in the ocean, and it will give you the temperature at 2 meters above.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Because you can measure it with infrared and things like that.
Yeah, and we just talked about on the last podcast about how the European Space Agency is planning to put that satellite up to measure far infrared temperature of the Earth, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, there is a premise to all of this, though. I mean, all these perceptions, I know you call them stupid, but for me, I like being skeptical, and actually, if it wasn't for this podcast, I would probably be in a boat similar to, where I'd read something like this and be like, oh yeah, then of course, if the measuring method has changed over the years, well, we can't really compare, etc. But
I think it's a weak argument to make, because there are still ways to standardize the readings and make sure that they do match up. It's definitely something that science has been doing for hundreds of years in terms of doing that kind of data analysis, and they're pretty good at it by now. I would like to say that I don't actually think necessarily that people are stupid for. Maybe I do, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, be honest.
But I don't think it's a constructive way to talk to people that believe differently to you. However, I think it is a lot of these views are driven by stupidity, if I'm honest.
And to be honest, the reason why I haven't particularly called them out on being stupid, George, is because I like I just said, I would have fallen for the same exact arguments. So it'd be calling myself stupid at the same time too.
I mean, maybe I'm being unfair, and maybe I'm overestimating the access that people have to objective information on this, because I've studied a degree in some of the things we're talking about, and so to me, a lot of the answers that are given are, it's like I'm just almost flabbergasted. The suggestions. It's the same with my view on the flat Earth theories. Like, some of the suggestions are just mental. It's like you've ignored scientific principles, you've ignored things that I know are true, that there's heavy evidence for, to make your point. But a lot of people don't know those things and don't have the grounding knowledge and the building blocks to come to the opposite conclusion to the one they do.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I'm honest, mate, I do feel like you are being a bit harsh. I think maybe there are 50% who are pretty dense, and there are 50% who want to be skeptical due to the fact of them wanting to be skeptical, like I have been.
But skepticism shouldn't allow you even to ignore good evidence.
Yeah.
Skepticism doesn't mean I'm just gonna ignore good evidence and that to me that sounds like an excuse. Not that I'm saying for you it is. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that for a lot of people that's an excuse. That's a justification of basically ignoring scientific evidence in order to form
Purposely
a view
obtuse.
that you claim is based on scientific evidence, and yet you're basing it on very, very weak or deniable scientific evidence that comes from poor sources or comes from very few sources that are disregarded by most of the scientific community. That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, no, and actually, you are correct. Like I said, I put myself in that type of category, and if I do ask myself why am I being skeptical, it is to do with the fact, if I'm honest, I want to be that guy who's there like, oh, I told you, everyone was believing this, and I told everyone that, they're wrong, and no one believed me, and now look where we are, type situation, right? And so, I do get where you're coming from, and I do agree with you. I think it's super interesting when why people are like this too. Why there's so many conspiracy theories. We talked about it last week, with the conspiracies, etc. It'd be interesting though, why they want to be skeptical of this. What positive gain do they get from being skeptical of the fact that we are causing climate change? Or let me choose my words carefully. Not causing climate change, but attributing to the climate changing rapidly. Why? What do you think is the reason? Why?
I suppose a myriad of reasons, really.
I mean,
in terms of it, it could be different for everyone. Some people it'll be about political gain. For some people it'll be about monetary gain. For some people it will be because they've never believed it. For some people it will be because they're skeptical of anything the government says or that scientists say. People. I'm pretty sure there's a whole
the Illuminati and the establishment.
No, a whole psychological concept about it where people distrust experts, not with any good reason to. As in, like, if you hear that there's a consensus from experts, then it must therefore be false because the experts are out to get you.
It's super interesting. I really wonder, because I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of reasons why. I think the monetary one is kind of false, though. I think if you are in it to get money, you'd be pushing climate change dramatically and making green products that supposedly are green.
No, some people would, but what if you are a massive tycoon in the oil industry, or not even a massive tycoon, but there are people with vested interests in renewable energies not taking off, for sure.
Well,
you know, if you're a bloke that builds coal-fired power plants in the United Kingdom, you do not want climate change to become a believed concept. I mean, you might. Maybe there's someone out there or there could be someone listening that builds them and actually hates it. He's just doing his job.
You know what's really interesting? I just kind of came to the decision that I definitely would, if I was a coal guy, and I knew that coal was running out or oil was running out, and that I was there like, climate change is real, and so therefore we need to make more batteries and all this kind of stuff. And guess what? That's now my industry.
You'd move industries, but if you couldn't move industries, if you were trapped because you had no expertise,
but it's energy though. It's energy.
No, but you only know how to, make a coal fire, and you don't have any expertise in, in the fine arts of advanced materials chemistry, and you can't make any new batteries, and so you're stuffed.
Oh no!
I lost you there for a minute,
mate. You cut out fully.
Am I back?
Obviously, George, you did not sort your internet well enough. Oh, it's struggling.
Okay, well, I suppose we should just call it here. I think we've been over a few myths, and if anyone listening has any views on these myths, then please let us know. Let us know if myths is the wrong word to use. I shouldn't be saying that. Some of them I think are myths, frankly, and I think that the ones we've maybe picked are maybe weak ones. If you've got an interesting point that you think that we should know about and that people aren't paying enough attention to, then let us know. You can talk to us at I Know Diddley or on our website iknownothing.podcast.com.